The morning fog clung low over the Seattle outskirts, quiet and soft, like a breath the earth hadn't quite exhaled. Jack Monroe stepped off the dusty bus with his duffel bag slung over one shoulder. The cold mist kissed his face, and he pulled the frayed collar of his coat tighter. This was day 6. The sign read, Sage Haven Community Farm, in hand-painted green letters, worn at the edges. Beyond it stretched rows of raised beds, orderly but overflowing with life. Leafy greens, herbs, wildflowers, even a few chickens scratching the soil near a compost bin. The smell of damp earth mixed with the sweetness of rosemary in the air. Jack wasn't used to that. Back in the army, mornings had smelled like engine oil and sweat. He didn't know what he was doing here. He'd left Luke's oven just the day before, still carrying the ghost of warm bread and the memory of Luke's trembling hands holding his son's war medal. A quiet ache remained in Jack's chest. There were moments he still couldn't breathe right. A small woman approached from one of the rows, wearing a wide straw hat and rubber boots splattered in soil. She had the calm presence of someone who spoke more with silence than with words. Her eyes were dark and steady behind thin glasses, and her face held the calm lines of both kindness and experience. "You must be Jack," she said, offering a hand. "I'm Sylvie Tran. Welcome to Sage Haven." Jack hesitated, then shook her hand. Her grip was firm, grounding. "Thanks. I'm not exactly a plant person," he muttered. "That's all right," Sylvie said. "The soil doesn't care if you're good at it. It just wants you to show up." She turned and began walking, expecting him to follow. As they passed through the rows, she pointed casually to the vegetables. "We're in a good season. Kale, chard, carrots, snap peas. You'll have your own plot by the end of the day. You'll water, weed, compost. Eat what you grow. Nothing fancy. Just honest work." Jack tried not to show how uncertain he felt. The idea of getting dirt under his fingernails made him clench his fists. He hadn't grown anything since third-grade science class. They reached a modest wooden cabin nestled beside the garden's edge. Sylvie opened the door, revealing a shared kitchen, bunks, and shelves lined with herbal teas, canning jars, and gardening books. It smelled like mint and earth and soap. "This'll be your bunk. Clean linens are inside. We do sunrise starts here. You'll see why tomorrow," Sylvie said, pausing. "This place isn't about fixing anyone. It's about giving you space to remember you don't need to be fixed." Jack nodded slowly. He wasn't sure if he believed her, but something about the way she said it made him want to stay. Later that afternoon, he wandered alone along the edge of the property. A weathered wooden fence framed the garden. Bees buzzed lazily in the lavender bushes, and small handwritten signs marked each row, "Hope, Recovery, Let Go." He stopped in front of a patch of soil with a wooden stake in the middle. A name hadn't been written on it yet. Sylvie's voice echoed in his memory. "You'll have your own plot." He knelt down. The soil was warm beneath the surface. He pressed his fingers into it cautiously, then paused. The sensation startled him. He hadn't touched the ground like this in years. In combat zones, the ground meant IEDs. You never got too close to it unless you had to. But this was different.
No explosions. No warnings.
Just dirt. His fingers sank deeper, felt alive. He exhaled, slower than usual. His body didn't tremble, and his breath didn't hitch. For once, from the distance, Sylvie stood watching, arms crossed lightly over her chest. She didn't approach. She didn't need to. Later that evening, Jack sat on the cabin's small porch with a cup of hot tea Sylvie had brewed, something floral and faintly citrusy. As the sky burned orange behind the evergreens, the farm slowly quieted. The chickens roost, the sun dipped, and Jack felt, faintly, the hum of something he hadn't known he was missing. Not peace, not yet, but maybe permission. Permission to begin again. Jack's boots sank slightly into the soft soil as he followed Sylvie between rows of kale and radish leaves still slick from last night's rain. She moved lightly across the path, her boots barely disturbing the earth. "This is your row," she said. pointing to a narrow patch of dirt bordered by small rocks and a crooked little sign that simply read Plot J. Monroe, in faded marker. Jack raised an eyebrow. Already labeled it? Sylvie gave a half-smile. Hope is the first seed we plant here. Jack squatted and studied the row. It looked harmless enough, just dirt and weeds.
No mines. No traps.
Still, his hands hesitated at the edge of the garden bed, as if touching it might change something he wasn't ready to name. Today you'll prep the soil, pull what you don't want, and work in the compost. Sylvie handed him a spade. Watch your back though. The carrots bite. Jack smirked despite himself. Copy that, Commander. She laughed and walked away, leaving him alone with the spade and his uncertainty. By noon, his shirt clung to him with sweat, and his fingers were caked in dirt. The job looked easier than it was. Roots clung stubbornly to life, even the weeds. He yanked one tall dandelion out and fell backward with a grunt, landing on the ground. Damn weeds, he muttered. You just insulted a flower with more healing properties than aspirin. Jack twisted around to see a man sitting nearby on a bench under the shade of a peach tree. Broad-shouldered, skin sun-darkened, hair gray and uneven. The man had a small wooden cane resting against his leg and a tattered camouflage field jacket draped across his shoulders despite the warmth. You must be the new guy, he said. Jack wiped his brow. That obvious? The man gave a slow nod. We all come here looking like the storm just let go of us. My name's Elliot. Don't worry. You'll learn. The soil's forgiving. Jack looked down at his blistering hands. Doesn't seem like it. That's because you're fighting it, Elliot said. This isn't a war. Stop trying to win. Jack sat down next to him on the grass. The sun filtered through the leaves above, casting broken light onto their shoulders. I don't know how to do anything that's not a fight, Jack admitted quietly. Elliot didn't answer right away. He reached into the front pocket of his jacket and pulled out a small folded piece of paper. You know what this is? He asked, offering it. Jack opened it carefully. It was a drawing, a simple pencil sketch of a garden bed, labeled with vegetables. Tomatoes, basil, cucumbers. My daughter drew that for me, Elliot said. She was 12. It's the first thing I looked at when I got out of VA Psych. She mailed it to the wrong hospital, ended up in Oregon. But somehow it got to me. I held on to it. Is she still around? Elliot's mouth tightened.
No.
She didn't wait long enough to see me climb out. Silence fell between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Jack folded the paper gently and handed it back. Elliot looked toward the fields. First time I worked here, I tried to mow down a lettuce patch with a hoe. Thought it'd be faster. Sylvie made me replant the whole thing by hand. Took me a week. But I'll tell you what, that salad was the best damn thing I've eaten since '87. Jack chuckled softly. She's got a way about her. She sees the cracks and plants something in him. The breeze picked up, carrying with it the scent of dill and compost. Somewhere nearby, a rooster crowed half-heartedly, as if confused by the hour. Elliot stood slowly, using the cane. You'll find your rhythm. You don't have to heal fast. Just real. Jack watched him walk away, the slow shuffle of boots in dirt. He turned back to his garden row. The weeds looked different now, less like enemies, more like messengers. That evening, after tools were cleaned and dinner shared, chickpea stew and garden salad, everything grown on site, Jack returned to his plot. The sun was slipping behind the hills, casting a golden glow across the rows. He crouched beside the soil again, touched the surface gently. This time he didn't force it. He let his hands sink slowly, scooping small handfuls of earth. It smelled warm, alive. There was something sacred in it, something ancient. For years, his hands had known only steel, guns, gear, restraint. Now they held dirt, and somehow it felt like less of a fall, and more like coming home. He stayed there until the stars began to emerge, faint and quiet above the silhouette of the trees. He didn't speak, didn't think, just listened. The earth didn't talk back, but it didn't need to. Jack Monroe woke before the sun.
No alarms.
No reveille. Just the faint hum of wind brushing through tall grass and the cluck of restless chickens beyond the trellis. He pulled on his work shirt, creased, mud-stained, and slightly stiff from hanging in the open air. The scent of mint tea still lingered from the night before. Outside, the world was still a deep blue, not quite day, not quite night. That in-between hour where things felt weightless. He stepped into the soil barefoot. It was damp, cold, but real. Each morning since his arrival, Jack had been waking earlier. Not from nightmares this time, but from something else. A quiet invitation, like the earth itself was calling him before the world could interrupt. He walked the path to his garden plot in silence. Plot J. Monroe looked different already. Rows were neater. The baby kale leaves had emerged. Tiny green shoots pushed up through the soil like shy hands reaching for the light. He knelt, and for the first time in years, he didn't mind the silence. By midday, Jack had filled the compost barrel, turned the soil in the herb section, and carried 2 watering cans across the field without complaint. Sylvie had him sorting seedlings today: basil, lemongrass, lavender. She explained how each had different healing properties. But Jack didn't retain much. He just liked the way the basil smelled like summer, and the lavender reminded him of a bar of soap from his grandmother's house. "You're quiet today," Sylvie remarked as they stood side by side, fingers deep in potting mix. Jack shrugged. "Feels weird to say anything. Feels like if I speak, I'll break something." Sylvie smiled without looking at him. "That's the gift of the garden. You don't need to speak to belong." They worked in rhythm. The only sounds were the scratch of soil, the rustle of wind through tomato vines, and the distant hum of bees. After lunch, Jack found himself by the shade tree where Elliot had first sat. It had become his favorite spot. He liked the way the sunlight poured through the leaves like scattered gold, and how the air always smelled just slightly of lemons there. As he sat, he noticed her for the first time. A little girl, 7 or 8, perched near the compost barrel with 2 crooked pigtails and a t-shirt that read, "Grow Something Wild." Her hands were covered in dirt up to her wrists, and she was furiously digging with a broken plastic shovel. Jack didn't speak, just watched. After a few minutes, the girl stood and walked toward him, holding something behind her back. "Hey," she said boldly. "Hey, you're the new guy, the one who looks like a tree." Jack blinked. "A tree?" "Yeah," she said, stepping closer. "You're tall, quiet." In it was a knobby, misshapen carrot with a tiny twist at the bottom. "Here. It's ugly, but it's the sweetest one I grew." Jack looked at the carrot like it was a medal, something sacred. "Thank you," he said, gently accepting it. "Don't peel it too much. The flavor's in the skin," Mira advised with the authority of someone twice her size. Then she skipped away, leaving a trail of muddy footprints in her wake. Jack looked down at the carrot, crooked, cracked, but still growing. He suddenly felt like crying and didn't know why. That evening, Jack found himself under the big cedar tree with a notebook in hand. Sylvie had left it for him without a word, just placed it beside his dinner tray with a pen. The cover was blank, but when he opened it, the inside read, "This space is yours. No rules, just roots." He hesitated at first. Writing always felt too exposed, too revealing. But then he remembered Myra's words. "A girl gave me a broken carrot, and I think it healed something in me. I am not whole, but I am growing." He paused. The pen trembled slightly in his grip. Then he underlined the last line once. And for the first time since his discharge, he felt still. Not frozen, not trapped, just still. The night was warmer than usual. The fields shimmered gently beneath the moonlight, and the scent of crushed basil still lingered on Jack's hands. Dinner had been a quiet affair. Sylvie had roasted squash and Elliot told a story about losing a boot in the compost pile. Mira had painted a sign that read "Worm Hotel" and proudly nailed it above the vermiculture bin. Everything felt light, too light. As Jack lay in his bunk, the silence pressed against him like wet cloth. His mind started its usual wandering, memories creeping in at the edges of comfort. the kind he'd learned to drown in late-night television or alcohol. But here there was nothing to distract him, just the rustling of leaves and the gentle creak of the cabin wood. Then it came. A loud crack tore through the night like a bullet. He sat up, heart slamming. Another one, louder this time. A screech, then a boom. The sound exploded across the sky outside like artillery fire. Fireworks. Someone from the nearby village was celebrating. But Jack didn't register that. All he knew was combat. Incoming. Ambush. His breath disappeared. The walls of the cabin spun. The bed became sand. The scent of basil twisted into burnt cordite. He hit the floor, scrambling. His back slammed into the wall as he crawled beneath the bed, gasping for air, nails digging into the wooden planks. His mind screamed names, coordinates, warnings. His mouth couldn't form any of them. He was back there, in the alley, in the heat, blood in his mouth. His friend beside him, unmoving, the smell of metal and smoke thick in his nose. Another blast. His body jerked violently. Outside, the others stirred. Lights flicked on in nearby rooms. Footsteps approached. Jack didn't see them. He only saw flashes. Then a shadow filled the doorway. It was Elliot. No words, just presence. The older man knelt slowly by the bed, careful not to touch Jack. He didn't rush, didn't ask, just sat there in the dark, breathing with him. One breath in, one breath out. Elliot tapped his cane once against the floor. A small rhythm.
Top.
Silence.
Top.
Silence. The sound pulled Jack's eyes toward him. Not out of fear but recognition. Grounding. Real. Jack's shoulders slumped. His breath came in short bursts. He curled tighter. "Jack," Elliot said softly. "You're not there. You're here. Listen to the chickens. The wind. Not the explosions." But Jack couldn't speak. Elliot didn't push. After what felt like hours, the fireworks stopped. Silence returned, but it wasn't peaceful. It was raw, like open skin. Jack's body trembled. He let his forehead rest against the floor. Then soft footsteps. A mug appeared beside him. Steam rose from it faintly. Sylvie. She didn't say a word, just placed it there and retreated. Chamomile. Lavender. Maybe ginger. The scent wrapped around him like something old and kind. Jack didn't drink it, but he didn't push it away either. Eventually, he crawled out from under the bed. He didn't try to explain. There was nothing to explain. Elliot helped him to his feet without a word. Jack sat on the edge of the bed, sweat-soaked and shaking. "I thought I was past this," he whispered hoarsely. Elliot shook his head. "It doesn't leave, but you can learn to walk with it." Later that night, Jack sat outside on the porch, the untouched mug still warm in his hands. The sky had returned to calm. Stars blinked above like tiny reminders of something permanent. Sylvie joined him, draped in a thin shawl. She didn't sit close, just nearby. "The first time it happened to me," she said quietly, "I was in a hospital break room. Someone dropped a tray of metal instruments. I nearly broke a glass door trying to get out." Jack turned toward her. "I wasn't a soldier," she continued, "but trauma speaks the same language in all of us." Jack looked down at his hands, now trembling less. "I keep thinking if I stay busy enough, I won't shatter." "You didn't shatter," Sylvie said gently. "You cracked. That's different. Cracks let the light in." They sat in silence, wrapped in the soft breath of the garden's night. Myra's Worm Hotel sign swung slightly in the breeze, cracked, but still hanging. Jack finally took a sip from the mug. It was bitter and sweet all at once, and real. The sun peeked through the fog the next morning as if it, too, was hesitant to rise after the chaos of the night before. Jack hadn't slept much. He'd stayed out on the porch long after Sylvie had gone back inside, cradling the cooling mug, watching darkness bend into day. The soil had soaked in the night's moisture. Everything felt softer, quiet again. He pulled on his boots and stepped outside, the notebook tucked under one arm. Today felt different, not easier, but possible. Mira found him by the tomato beds, arms crossed, pigtails uneven as always. "You look better," she said, matter of fact. Jack glanced up. "You always say what you're thinking?" She nodded. "Grown-ups lie too much." He smiled. "Fair enough." Sylvie had assigned them to start a new tomato section together. "Something to nurture," she had said. Mira took it seriously. She held up each seedling like it was made of glass, inspecting every leaf for spots or tears. Jack admired that, how gently she treated small, fragile things. He'd forgotten how. They worked in silence for a while, planting each start a foot apart, tying twine around wooden stakes. Jack looked over and saw Mira sketching in a notebook while kneeling in the dirt. "What are you drawing?" "You," she said without looking up. He raised an eyebrow. "Well, not you, tree. Remember?" Jack laughed. "Right. The walking tree." She held up the drawing. A stick figure man with roots coming out of his feet, a little smile on his face, and tomatoes growing from his arms. "That's better than I deserve," he said, crouching beside her. "Nope," Mira said, firm. "You're starting to grow." She handed him the page. He folded it gently and slid it into the back of his own journal. That afternoon, Jack found Elliot by the compost bins, tossing browning lettuce into the pile. "Need help?" Jack offered. Elliot grunted. "Always." They worked together wordlessly for a while, the rhythm of shoveling and turning broken only by the buzz of flies and distant cluck of chickens. Jack finally asked, "Did you ever write them?" Elliot paused. "Write who?" "The ones you lost." Elliot leaned on his shovel. "All of them, some more than once. Never mailed a single one." "Why not?" "Because they weren't for them. They were for me." Jack nodded slowly. "I think I need to write mine." Elliot didn't speak for a moment. "Then, do it. Don't wait for the right words. Just bleed." That evening, Jack sat under the peach tree with his journal. The one Sylvie had given him. The one that had sat mostly blank until today. But now, pages began to fill. He wasn't writing polished sentences. He wasn't censoring. He wrote like he was digging into soil, into memory, into himself. He wrote about fear. About being the only one left after the blast. About holding what was left of a friend. About waking up screaming and not knowing where he was. About guilt heavier than any gear he'd ever carried. "I didn't save you. I didn't even move. I told myself it was training. But the truth is I was frozen. And I've hated myself ever since." He paused, hand shaking, then turned the page. "But I'm here. Somehow. And there's this little girl who thinks I'm a tree. And an old man who doesn't talk much but never leaves me alone when I break. And dirt that accepts me without asking questions. So maybe that's enough. For today." Jack closed the notebook and exhaled slowly. A weight lifted, not gone, but no longer strangling. He looked around the farm. Evening shadows stretched across the fields, painting the rows in long, golden lines. The tomatoes stood tall. The compost steamed gently in the corner, and Myra's worm hotel sign hung crooked but proud. Then he heard footsteps. Elliot. The old man didn't say anything. He sat beside Jack on the grass and pulled out 2 peaches. He handed one over, juice already dripping from his fingers. Jack bit in. Sweet. Messy. Alive. Elliot finally said, "You're not a soldier anymore." Jack nodded. "I'm not sure who I am yet." "That's okay," Elliot replied. "You're planting. You'll find out when it grows." They sat together as the stars began to bloom in the sky. Jack didn't speak, but in his chest something answered. Not forgiveness, but a start. The morning was unusually bright. Jack Monroe stood at the edge of Plot J. Monroe, now rich with promise. The kale stood upright. The tomatoes had grown another inch overnight. A single earthworm wriggled near the surface. Tiny proof that the soil was alive and welcoming. He squatted, touched the dirt one last time. "Thanks," he whispered. Behind him, Sylvie called out, "Don't forget your boots." He turned. She stood on the porch, holding his mud-stained boots in one hand and a brown paper parcel in the other. "What's that?" Jack asked, walking over. A little something from the farm. She pressed the package into his hand. He opened it slowly. Inside was a bunch of fresh-picked herbs tied together with twine, a bottle of lavender oil, and a small cloth pouch of heirloom tomato seeds. There was also a folded card, handwritten in Sylvie's calm lettering. For the road ahead, grow something, even if it's just a moment of stillness. He swallowed the knot in his throat. You didn't have to. I wanted to, she said. People like us, we don't always get parting gifts. Just exits. Jack nodded, eyes down. This place, it didn't fix me. It wasn't supposed to, she said gently. But it gave you ground to stand on, and roots to carry forward. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Sylvie smiled and handed him a plastic container. Inside was a slightly crooked carrot. She insisted. Mira was waiting by the Worm Hotel, hugging a mason jar filled with dirt. This is from the good side of the compost, she announced proudly. It's got nutrients. And maybe a few worms. Jack blinked. Worms? They're your friends now. Don't throw them away. He took the jar, trying to appear serious. Understood, General. Mira hesitated, then stepped forward and hugged him tightly around the waist. Her small frame trembled slightly. Don't forget us, she said into his jacket. I won't. She looked up. Even if you go far? Jack knelt down, met her eyes. Even then. He handed her a small envelope, her name printed in crooked handwriting. Mira. Inside was a page torn from his notebook. A sketch. A tree man with roots in his boots, standing in a garden. On his branches, tomatoes, basil, and a little girl sitting and laughing. Mira smiled so wide it pushed the tears out. I'm gonna hang it on the chicken coop. Elliot walked him to the edge of the dirt road. Neither of them said goodbye. They just stood shoulder to shoulder, watching the field breathe. Jack reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. I wrote it, he said quietly. The letter. I don't know if I'll send it, but I wrote it. Elliot nodded. That's enough. Jack hesitated, then reached into the pouch Sylvie had given him and handed Elliot half the tomato seeds. Elliot blinked. You sure? I'll find my own plot, somewhere new, but these are yours, for when you're ready to grow again. Elliot accepted them wordlessly. His hand closed around the seeds like they were something sacred. Then Jack did something he hadn't done since he'd arrived. He pulled Elliot into a hug. It was brief, but real. Thank you, Jack said, for sitting with me, when I couldn't sit with myself. Elliot tapped his cane on the ground once. Just returning the favor. The road out of the farm was unpaved and quiet. Jack walked alone, duffel bag over his shoulder, parcel under one arm, and a mason jar of compost soil in the other. He didn't rush. Birds flitted through the trees above. A breeze stirred the grass. Somewhere behind him, a child's laughter echoed faintly. He smiled. Halfway down the road, he stopped and turned to look back. The garden was no longer just a patch of dirt in his memory. It had become a part of him. The soil was in his shoes, under his nails, and maybe, just maybe, in his bones. He looked down at the jar in his hand, then up at the sky. Not for answers, just acknowledgement. I'll plant something, he said aloud. Not a vow, not a prayer, just a promise. To the earth, to himself, to the man he was learning to become. And with that, Jack Monroe walked on, carrying not his past, but his roots.